Can you hear me? Woo to you. You're here early in the morning. Thank you for being here.
Made it.
You made it. Congratulations. This is an open session. Thank you for joining this morning. Oh, I pressed a button and something happened, actually. Not sure. There we go. Welcome to Before and After the Future of Inclusivity. Sara and I are here to tell you a little bit about the past and a little bit where we've come from and where we'd like to go and how to head towards inclusivity. So we're going to give you some tips today. My name is Jaclyn Adair. I'm a senior talent acquisition partner at Timbre Games in Vancouver, Canada. I've been there for a year now, just a little over a year actually. And when I started, I believe I was employee 25 or 26 or something like that. And currently we're sitting around 70 people. So it's been a busy year in recruiting as we've brought new folks onto the team. And what I joined Timbre for was really the alignment for building a diverse and inclusive team. So that's really what made me want to join. And I pitched the talk to do a diversity recruiting conversation and got partnered with Sara via Jenny's suggestion. And originally was like, oh, great, I'm going to have to build a talk with someone on the other side of the planet. That should be easy. And we managed to pull it together. And I think we have a really good balance. And practiced it at her hotel yesterday. And I was like, I think we're going to be OK. So hopefully you think so as well. But I'm going to step aside for a bit. I'm going to let Sara introduce herself and do the first portion of the talk. So thanks.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so I'm also senior talent acquisition for Sumo, but just all the studios. The rest of talent acquisition is over there, so say hi to them. And interestingly, so I moved to the UK 5-6 years ago, and I came from a completely different background. I studied war and defense because I wanted to be a spy. And yes, it was a lot of Age of Empires, and I regret every bit of it. But when I was in the UK with no job, no kind of prospects, and no idea of what I was going to do, I fell into recruitment. And there was so much going wrong with it. From people literally just saying, oh yeah, don't call them, their name is just too long. And that probably means they are not from here. And then I look at my name, and I was like, oh, how did I get this job? But after a lot of struggles throughout like proper agencies and just going to building my recruitment experience, I think I've managed to kind of pinpoint a couple of things that really, really annoy me and we really need to change. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. Those are our contents. But first we're going to start, it is a journey. So we're going to start with rethinking recruitment. And I bet a lot of people probably here had a few experiences that are horrible, so they know that it needs to be, we need to be rethinking it. But then we're going to think about learning to listen, because it is the most important thing for everything, really. Then Jaclyn is going to help us with, how do we benefit? Then we'll define our part and then share the responsibility, because we all do have a responsibility in this. It doesn't matter if it's small or bigger. But this is where we start. So in that kind of like first 5 years of my experience in recruitment, that was a lot wrong. But the thing that bothered me the most was the practices and the processes were really, really old. And when I say old, I mean old. So this is the first CV. And I'm going to ask you, who do you think is responsible for this?
Anybody?
No one? This is Leonardo da Vinci's CV, which is considered the first CV ever. And while the format is not exactly what we have today, it is a one-page document of what he had done and what he wanted to do. So it is a bit bizarre to think that was in the 15th century, long, long time ago. And then, which century did we see the creation of the first job advert? Anyone has any idea? What, sorry? That was on the 19th, they were very close, and that was because of the Industrial Revolution. For the first time, we had a lot of people needing, a lot of jobs in the industry and a lot of people in the countryside. So people had to sell the jobs, and that's how we created the first job advert. Still very, 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 very old. And then when we look at, recruitment agencies, which they kind of shaped how we do recruitment, even internal in studios as well, because we didn't have to compete with them. So everyone ends up having like very similar practices. But recruitment agencies were created after the Second World War, because everyone came back from the war and they needed jobs. And no one knew what they're doing, they didn't know what their transferable skills were. So then kind of like agencies started to like put people around. And the issue with all of this is, clearly, the CV, the job adverts, and recruitment agencies, recruitment as a whole was created a while ago. And if we look at the society we had back then, It's just nowhere near the society we have today. And that is because the way that we source, the way that we attract, and the way that we recruit has a direct connection who ends up getting hired. But if the processes were developed a while ago for a completely different society and audience, our workforce will exactly reflect those processes, right? And that's what we see in games. So this is disheartening and it hurts, but we do need to take this in consideration. And whenever we think about diversity and inclusion, this is the issue. And this is what we need to fix. So at the moment, we have 67% being male and 89% being white, when we know for a fact that half the players are female, and there are more players everywhere else but in Europe and America. So it is kind of bizarre that this is like the statistics that we're looking at. But it makes sense if you think that the way that we are recruiting started from the 15th century. Who could have a job in the 15th century? So, and that is why we need to rethink it. So if you want to diversify your workforce, we need to learn to tailor our processes. And sometimes that seems really, really scary. Whenever we introduce the pronouns, everyone's like, oh my God, there's 1,000 pronouns. How am I supposed to know what's going on? But the lining thing is, if you just care about people and you take into consideration what they choose, then that is the thing, isn't it? So instead of just creating processes for every single specific group, why don't we just design things to be inclusive? Why don't we just design things to have the human as a whole and not some humans in mind? For example, and this is me just talking a lot about myself, but I'm a biracial South American woman. I have, well, Dad says one vascular disease, but I found another one, so there we go. I also have chronic pain. I'm on the autism spectrum, which I found out in January, which is a bit crazy. Anxiety, aphantasia, which literally means I can't visualize. So, when people say, oh, close your eyes, imagine an apple, pitch black. I don't know what that means. So whenever you put visualize something on your job description, being able to visualize so-and-so, I literally don't know what you're talking about. But you can't guess any of those things about me looking at me right now. So how do you expect to accommodate those people? You can't just put the work on, asking a question, do you need any accommodations? Because if I just found out what kind of accommodations I need, how am I supposed to advocate for myself? That's why we need to be thinking about this from the design point and not after, once we encounter those people coming into the process. And then, because I realized, okay, so if the processes are old and they don't work and our society is different, how do we go about that? And I just thought it would be very hypocritical of me to try to redo all the process myself. Because, I do need to listen to other people and other groups. And that's when I partnered with Hitmarker, and we put our survey that had over 600 participants that spent a total of 190 hours talking about their preferences when job hunting, their main barriers, and just things in general that they happened to them and they obviously didn't like. But the way I will spell a little bit about the methodology, but I won't go too much into it, don't worry. But the data that you see here, it was divided by, we had lots of people answering from everywhere in the industry, but I picked people with over 3 years of experience in games, because I think it would be way more relevant for us. And also, all the questions that you see, people were asked, how important is benefit information on a job description? How important for you is, hear about career progression? And we're going to be focusing more on the very important questions, but I'll walk you through it. So job adverts, benefit information. So while 51% of the respondents find the benefit information very important, it jumps to 66.7 when we look at cisgender women. And that is somewhat easy to see why. If you can't help but, the society looks at you different, you might end up getting pregnant, you might end up having all of those things that happen to you because of how you were born. You need to think about benefits. You don't have the privilege to ignore that. Working patterns. Most people say, 64% of responders, very important, as we all probably would find. 76.9% people with disabilities. I myself, I have chronic pain, so if I don't really know what's going to happen at work, I don't have the privilege of applying to every job I find that doesn't really describe how they work. Career progression. So only 38% of the most represented group in the industry said this type of information is very important. And let's remember, the most represented group are white males. So only 38% of white males think that career progression is important. That number jumps to 44.5 for cisgender women and 58.8 to I'm so sorry because I hate putting everything in an acronym, but for the sake of the presentation, you know. Anyway, and why do we think that? Because those people are the least represented in senior positions. They don't have the privilege of being, oh yeah, I will get promoted eventually. I don't have to look for that in the job advert, as the most represented group can do. No, we need to make sure that they say anything about what role comes after, what we need to be mindful of, how do I progress? Because then once we're there, we can actually say, hey, this is what you said in your job advert. It's been 2 years. And this one was interesting because we all had this collective meltdown of automated interviews. They would ask you to answer a few questions on video, and God, I hated them so much. So I made a question about it on the survey because I needed to know if I was the only one. And I wasn't. Everyone does hate them. So 14.9% of the most represented group found it very, very uncomfortable. But then we look at transgender people, and that jumped to 26.4. We look at non-binaries, 46.7. Why is that? Because we know that if that person is not there with us, face-to-face, talking to us, they won't see us as much as a full human. So all looks will weigh more than what we say. And that is absolutely not acceptable. So if you ever thought about automated interviews in your processes and that, oh, that helps everyone and it helps to bias, it does not. It's horrible. Everyone hates it. Cover letters. And this part really, really annoyed me. I'm not going to lie. So I hate cover letters in general. I don't think we should be asking for them. But when I ask, how often do you write a new cover letter for every job application? 28% of the most represented group, so 28% of the white males, write a new one for every job application. But then when we compare with people with disabilities and women, that jumps quite a lot. How come we are putting the most effort and we are the least represented? Why are we asking for criteria that is a cover letter that's already asking for people that have probably less time, that have to have other jobs, that have families, that have other things in their lives, to write them down? They are writing a new one for each application, and still they are not getting the job because of that. So should we be scrapping them as a whole? Because I'm not really sure if, honestly, if only 28% of people are writing a new one, you're reading the same cover letter every other studio read. This doesn't help anyone. And the reason why I am telling you this is because information is directly connected to what you attract and what people you attract. A lot of people don't have the privilege of seeing a very basic job description that has no details about anything and just applying. Because, of course, we have an amount of weekly hours that we can put in looking for a new job and then working a job and then taking care of ourselves and everything that comes with that. But every time that you just don't add any bit of information on your job description, you are attracting more of the most represented group. So when we say, there's no diverse people, yes, we do have that. We have a lot of data to show that we're just not attracting them because they don't have the privilege of just signing up to everything. So as a company, we do need to, and this is for everyone, and we'll get that, but every little bit of information that you can help someone in the application process, that will go a long, long way. So why no one wants to read a huge job advert? I would prefer a huge job advert that says everything I need to know than a job advert that doesn't tell me anything. And yeah, so what I kind of want to finish this part with is, because it's just not about, diverse talent is not existing, but it's about tailoring and redesigning our processes to accommodate a bigger group of humans, because that's who we are. If you add up every other group that is not the most represented group, that would be the majority of humanity. So I don't really understand why we're not designing for that. Now I will pass Jaclyn, and she would explain why we should care.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll jump in to talk a little bit about why we all benefit from diversifying the workforce and how inclusive practices are going to help us get there. And as talent acquisition partners, both Sara and I think about equity, diversity, and inclusion regularly as a part of our job, but I know not everybody in the audience here is recruiters and from HR. So you might be sitting out there, you might be asking yourself, how does this affect me? So you might think that you're too distanced from the real issue to make or affect change. You might think that this is an uphill battle or even a losing game. Or you might think that diversity isn't necessarily truly connected with video game development and think it's kind of fine, isn't it? To find an answer here, let me start with a question. Let me zoom out a little bit and check in with you all. A question that I ask to candidates all the time. What do you love about your job? Think about it for a second. And if that's maybe too big of a question, why don't you think about what do you value about the work that you do? And quick plug for Lori's talk. She's going to talk about values in her talk today. So feel free to go hop over to hers if you really don't know an answer to this question. But just think about that for a second, right? Of course, we might all have wildly different answers to this question as different individuals in different disciplines. Designers might talk about how they get a chance to constantly develop new ways to interact with the game mechanics and evolve the industry, or about how they create moving stories and memorable experiences. Artists might talk about how they get to create and bring to life unique or beloved characters, spaces, or things, or how they add beauty and perspective to the game. Engineers might talk about how they actualize the dreams of the team, or how they get to leverage the newest, most innovative technology and solve problems to create fun. And what about me? Well, thank you for asking. If you asked me this question, I would say that my answer has two parts. Firstly, I get a chance to see video game development for the complex, dynamic, and living organism that it is. A player may only ever be expected to think about the game that's just in their hand, but us as game developers know that below the surface there was just so much work. It's not just an art department, it's environment artists, character artists, concept artists, technical artists. It's not just a design department, it's narrative designers, levels designers, systems designers, technical designers, I could go on. But the exposure to all that hard work of individuals who know what they love about their job is the first reason why I love what I do. Oops, I wasn't supposed to go yet. The second thing I love about my job and the answer to this question is that I get to learn about people, about individuals. Just like a player in a video game, the reader of a resume isn't always expected to think about what went into creating that person, all of their experiences, their interactions, their struggles, their successes that got them to where they are today. By interviewing them, I get to learn about them as individuals. People are just as unique as video games. And what makes them both unique is actually what got them there. What makes video games and people so interesting is that they are different. They vary. They're diverse. It's natural to have some sort of reaction to the word diversity in today's climate. It can sound like impending responsibility or something we don't understand, or maybe sounds completely out of our league. So now that we've been thinking about what we love and what we value about our job, what about diversity connects to that? Remember my team from a couple slides ago? Let's bring them back and ask them about diversity. So I asked my team, how does diversity help your team develop a better game? My design team told me, the more various, diverse voices in the room, the more diverse experiences that we can understand and account for. The more we can represent a diversity of perspectives in game design, the more our audience will appreciate and connect with the message that we're building. Comparatively, the less diversity, the more likely we'll be to be making too many assumptions that lead to making games for ourselves and not for our intended audience. That's a quote from Kat Neal. She's sitting right over there. Her talk's also later. Alan Paul, one of Timbre's artists, said, I find being around other walks of life allows me to see art going on many different paths. The only way an artist can evolve their art is by learning and growing from others. Another important thing to consider is the topic of cultural awareness when searching for art references, says Blanca, another artist at Timbre. Bringing a diverse team together can create an environment where we normalize this and become more aware of different cultural perspectives. My engineering team said, and this is my favorite quote of all of them, the more different minds at the table equals more different solutions equals better chance to find the best solution, comma, diversity equals just plain better. That's from Alia. I just thought it was just too engineering and too fantastic to not include in this presentation. Another engineer, Ian Lane Hatch, stated, there are assumptions that engineers can make about users that make software worse, that designers are unlikely to think about or notice, and have a more diverse engineering team helps to catch those things and make software better for folks. So what about what we all have in common as game developers? Oops, you didn't see that. We all understand that games are not played by one type of person. We know that a great story can connect players of different walks of life and make them think about things in new ways and find empathy with one another. We know that unique virtual spaces and characters can transport us to other worlds, putting us in someone else's shoes. We know that technology that improves the experience of a new or existing player base is the key to the success of our games. So back to our original question, how does this affect you? And with all this in mind, I would argue that as game developers, now you can see it, being diverse and inclusive is intrinsically tied to who we are and what we value. And ignoring its importance or our role in improving it is actually holding us back. So let's talk about defining our part and how we can step in and take action. How the heck do we even get there? Where even are diverse candidates? I sure as heck know they're not applying. And it isn't intentional that we didn't hire a diverse candidate. We just hire the best person for the job. Plus, there are deadlines approaching, and finding diverse talent takes time, and we just don't have the resources for that, okay? And we have a team of people that focus on EDI work, don't we? Isn't that HR's job? Yeah. Can someone please raise their hand in this room if you've heard someone or used yourself or thought yourself any of these phrases, please? Thank you very much. Point proven. Ooh. See, these are super common, and the real reason that they are is that each of these phrases, individually and collectively, can all be true still. But that doesn't mean that the value of a diverse workforce becomes untrue, okay? And by leaning on these reasons as excuses, we're actively doing ourselves a massive disservice to our team, to our games, and to our players. I know why we lean on these things, okay, and dealing with these things. It's hard, okay? It's super hard. And just like any problem or idea in game dev, it starts with a few people who really care. They spread their passion to others, and everyone gets involved to get stuff done. But you didn't get into game development because it was easy, did you? And we know that if it makes us better, why don't we drop the excuses once and for all and just try harder? So let's go ahead and discuss some ways that we can define how we as individuals can start to make some noteworthy progress. Literally anyone can start here and use their perspective to start talking about action and change. So talk about it. Call out your desire to improve. Tell your team that you care about this and that you want to start making actionable changes to the way that you and your team can be more inclusive. Ask your team, are there issues related to diversity and inclusion in your team? Have you thought to ask? Don't carry the burden alone, and don't expect HR to. Ask your team, especially those who have more diverse profiles, why it matters to them and how they think that we can do better. In making this presentation, I reached out to my diverse team and asked for their expert opinions here, and they had them. They were more than excited to talk about it, have their voices heard, and have their ideas heard as well. Own mistakes and shortcomings. Don't be so scared about talking about diversity imbalance or non-inclusive practices that might have snuck in over time. Just like any other data that you don't like, ignoring it won't make it go away. Share it with your team and tell them your hopes to improve. If there's been hurt or harm in the past that keeps getting swept under the rug, address that too. To move forward with progress, you may have to address these issues head on first. Lastly, discuss why it matters. Education on the benefits of EDI might need to be administered for some people to get on board. So don't just wait for some HR seminar to be scheduled. Bring up why it matters to you. Bring it up to your boss, to your coworkers, to those people who give those tired excuses to you, or in a meeting, just by asking, are we being inclusive here? Define it. The problem. If you can't define what's broken, how are you going to try to fix it? By defining the issues you see and talking them through, we can start to map out a response to them. Write it down and share it. At Timbre, the design team have woven diversity and inclusion directly into the design pillars of one of our projects. The designers have come back to this value as they make important decisions about how the game is actually going to get created. It calls out the need for regular conversations on inclusive game design and even asks designers to prioritize diversity. In my team, the talent acquisition department worked collaboratively on a team charter. Again, diversity and inclusion has a starring role here, with one of our main missions being that we champion diversity as we grow. This means to advocate for candidates with high potential, not solely on opportunities and experiences that they've been previously granted. This also means that we prioritize developing a balanced team at Timbre. And this means we know that we aren't always the experts and that we will seek to learn and lean on those with different lived experiences than ourselves. Make realistic goals. I'm not just talking about hire X people by X date necessarily. Ask the team about what problems they want solved, define your problems, and set expectations, and that's a good start. Remember to avoid anything unrealistic or out of your direct control here, and remember that you can always ask for help from others. Bring up your goals as a part of your regular conversations with management, the team, and other goal-setting arenas. Be ready to adjust. You can't know everything, okay? And that's okay. No one is expecting you to be an expert. Diversity, by definition, is about being different. So when we learn about others, recognize that you might not understand the issues that they discuss, or really even need to understand them to want to improve. And sometimes saying, I don't know that, or I didn't know that, can make a difference. Welcome challenge. Game developers know that the road to shipping a title is bound to be rocky, right? We can leverage those skills in our approach to EDI efforts too. Someone may come along and say, it doesn't really work that way, and open our eyes to a reality that we previously didn't understand. And in these scenarios, it's best to lean in here. To get past the issue, we need to understand how it affects the person calling it out. Getting frustrated by turbulence can make us want to throw in the towel. So try to ask better questions and show resilience in these moments. Those are the ones that truly matter. Getting very thirsty. I'm gonna have a sip of water. Is that okay? Delicious. Complacency isn't healthy. You simply wouldn't accept that someone is avoiding their deliverables, right? So to deliver on your goals, you may need to highlight individuals or systems that actively push against change and progress. Accepting poor behavior can quickly spread to the team and reinforce issues that you're trying to eradicate. Remember to try to involve others when making decisions that affect them. Ask the quiet ones for their thoughts. Ask the outsiders what they think about what you're working on. Put your agile brain on and think about how often you have to talk to each other about what you've been working on. Be ready to have regular conversations about what is and isn't working. And make peace with the fact that you might not always have it go according to plan. And welcome proactivity instead of fighting fires. That's my part, so I'm going to pass it back over to Sara so she can talk about sharing the responsibility.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for talking about all of that. I love how Jaclyn just approaches the topic of like what we all should be doing. But my neurodiverse brain likes tables, so we'll be introducing a few tables for us. But I really, really like this because building a more inclusive, diverse gaming industry is not a solo quest. And I think that is so important because we need to remember what brought us to games in the first place. I doubt that there's not one single person here that made their first friends in a gaming community, because that was what happened to me. Or maybe, a really, really tough part of your life where you couldn't count on other people, but then you had people online that they were as close as. It really requires active engagement from every single player, but that is what we're doing. You can't make games alone. So none of the things that we talked today are things that you should be doing alone. We need to actively want to do them together while still understanding that we all have different responsibilities. So, and I will be dividing this between, juniors, experienced, senior leadership, but kind of look at the table in a way that, it adds up. So if you start as a junior, actively seek out opportunities to learn about different cultures, identities, perspectives. As Jaclyn said, doesn't matter which discipline you are, is incredibly important. Participate in the employee resource groups. We have Prism, which is amazing. Be there, say things, read, learn. Support and amplify the voices of your marginalized friends and colleagues and co-workers, because you know how hard it is for them to be heard in the first place. So if you can use your privilege to help that, why wouldn't you? Engage in inclusive language and behavior in person, online, and just don't let things pass. Be vocal, especially if you are not a diverse person. If you see something and you feel like that person would like to say something but they can't, that's when you become an ally. If you're not getting heard just as much, you're not being an ally, or else what are you doing? But Something I really like, and I wish I had done it, but I might start, but keep a journal of your first year in the role, because it can help onboarding other people. You know, if every single one of us is different, if we all have a little journal of like, this is how this works, this is how I prefer to do that, we will be kind of like getting all the different humans in our processes and making sure that they are helping each other without being too much of a burden on top of all the things they need to do. Experience. Refer individuals with different backgrounds. I am sorry, but if you're an experienced professional in games, you have at least, 4 or 5 years? I doubt it that you do not know a person that is not white man. I just doubt it. So if you know them. Refer is the best way to get those people in the company, because it means a talent acquisition team can just like quickly be like, oh, hey, this person, great, let's have a look. Mentor junior employees if you can, advocate for diverse perspectives, support the professional development of all your employees, all your colleagues that need it, or might just come from a background where they just didn't have that as a get-go. So if you can, why wouldn't you? Address microaggressions and promote respectful dialogue. If you're an experienced employee, you do have a little bit more weight on discussions, on fights, on conversations, on talks. So this is on you. Leads and managers, build interview panels with people from different backgrounds. You have no idea how it will make me feel comfortable if every time I had someone that maybe English wasn't their first language, or maybe someone that, is a bit younger or maybe older. Diversity comes in literally all shapes. That's the point of diversity. So we're not saying, you need to have one diverse person from each group on this huge interview panel, but you can try. You can try, and one at a time. Mentoring programs are always good, but make sure that you're rewarding your team for that time. People shouldn't be doing more work on top of their job to fix an industry. It's everyone's responsibility. Equitable distribution of opportunities and growth. I think that's the most important one as a leader and a manager. Because we had data, so you can't claim ignorance anymore. Those people are not represented in senior roles. So what do we do about that? How do we give opportunities to grow? And that does not mean promote everyone that is diverse, because that's what we need for data and numbers. It means actually saying, hey, this is the timeline. This is how you progress. How can I support you? It's not that hard. There's one that I really like. Buddy system. First jobs are so hard. Whenever you start a new job, just knowing I remember it was Candice, my coordinator from the talent acquisition team, and she was like, oh, by the way, book your lunch on your calendar. That is the type of thing that people need to know, and that is what buddy systems do. Make sure that people are not taking their first steps in a company alone, and they're actually with someone that has done the exact same things. Senior leadership. You need to establish metrics, but you do need to put leadership accountable. You cannot make everyone underneath you be accountable for things, because you are the person with the most power and resources. So that is on you. You have to actively seek diverse perspectives on making strategic decisions as well. We have a huge problem at the moment in most companies, to be completely honest, but the proper senior people aren't diverse. Yes, it might take us 10 years to have a 50-50 distribution in that, but can we create a different board that is a diverse board that will help you to filtrate those decisions, or maybe see the blind spots that you couldn't notice before? We can do that today. We don't need to wait until those people are around. But yeah, there's lots of things you can do. Scan a code, take a photo, I have resources, reach out if you want to talk to us, because we do, this is our bread and butter. We do that every day. So if you want to help, if you want to have a look at the tables as well, I will put the presentation on this QR code for SDC, so everyone can share, do whatever you want. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, I think we have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. We made it. 5 minutes. Do we have any questions for the 5 minutes? Yes, my dear. Oh, I picked her. I didn't have the mic, though. I thought you were just going to stand up. But you get to be amplified. Look at that. Testing.
Hiya. Great talk. Thank you so much. My question would be, if you, aside from all the bits that you've spoken about, and if you had unlimited money, time, resource, are there any practices that you'd want to see implemented into the recruitment process to make it more equitable?
Yes, I would fully remove cover letters. I would have work sample questions, because they are more relevant. Hiring managers get better results from that. You don't have to lean on someone's background, CV, university. If you can write a really good question as a hiring manager, and that person can answer that in detail, when you're satisfied with that, that is an interview. a cover letter can't do that in the first place, so I don't know why we're using them, but what would you do?
Yeah, I think I would want to consider, I'd want to take time and reach out to groups, different types of groups and communities, and really ask them what they're looking for, kind of what Sarah's data kind of pulled out, and then specialize some employer branding efforts aimed specifically at those individuals. Spend time talking to hiring managers and say, hey, how would a woman or a person of color be supported on your team? What types of systems do you utilize to make sure that their experiences are better? And, you know, put some advertisements out there that actually tell people about that, because, you know, you like to keep a job description not super wordy. You don't want to tell them everything. You don't want them reading the Bible as they're about to apply for a job, but you do want to make sure that they understand that it's going to be a great place to work for them, and provide that safety before they even send in their application. So I think that would be my like, if I had all the time in the world answer. Yeah.
I'll combine with yours. We do it together.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Anyone else?
If not, that's okay. Oh, there we go.
Hello. That was such a lovely talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know that initial sort of graph that you had about the state of the industry, what pool is that data pulled from? Is it just specifically Sumo Group, or is it the industry as a whole?
That's the UK census from the last one. I think it was last year, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. For my report, which you guys can access on the code, I have like everything, breaking down everything I asked. That was the census before. I've used these ones because literally I compared them, and I compared to the Sumo census and I compared to the other census. They do show the exact same data. So while it might change a little bit, is while some people might create a new excuse to why, oh, that data is different, the message is still very much there, even though we just have a few data points different.
Cool. Thank you.
So did you just pull the UK? Was that like,
Yeah,
how did you get this?
My report is the whole world,
Okay.
but the data that I use here is the UK.
Nice.
But they are very similar, which is interesting, because the processes are the same. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. So I work in audio, and that wouldn't until 6 months ago have struck me as something where I'd need recruitment chops. But when I had to be a part of kind of casting for a pitch video, it became using like a casting agent to kind of to pull. It became very obvious that we hadn't given them very good instructions, because the people they brought in to cast were exclusively young, attractive white women, and then myself, my lead, and our producer were like, we've missed a trick here.
I wouldn't play that game.
Okay, we haven't instructed this very well. So within the realm of casting, which is basically a form of recruitment, have you got any interesting sort of techniques, practices, or suggestions specifically for casting?
I think for me, and I used to be a model, when I was 15, I tried it all. But I think the most important thing for me, and they told me when I was getting 1,000 no's, is that they do have a brief, and you don't match this brief. And whenever I would look to the brief of modeling, it's just very specific, high and blah, 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 and so on. But when it comes to casting, it is the message that you want out of that people. So when people are looking at that video, what message do you want them to get? And then you do the backward movement. So, okay, if you want people to feel included and see someone that they never seen playing this game and be like, oh my God, you know what, that may be something for me, then you start casting from that point. Who are your outsiders? Who are the people that, you know, get people excited, but also look a little bit different. So for me, it's always kind of coming from the opposite. What message I want to send, what I want to accomplish with this. And independent of being, you know, I don't think we should aim to be diverse. I think we should be aim to be caring about people in general, because that is just the moral thing to do. But when we talk about marketing, when we're talking about like casting in general, I think it's really important to think about the message, about the audience that you're going for.
Yeah.
And if your audience is as many people as possible, then, you know, you should definitely try to get diverse people for that.
Yeah, I think what Sarah's saying is intentionality, right? Like
Yes.
being intentional with what you're going to ask the individuals going out and doing that casting for, right? So if your intention is to make sure you're representing the group that you're aiming your ad for that, then I think it's important to make sure to tell them, hey, these are the types of individuals I'm looking for. Because, you know, obviously sometimes they're just going to cast what they think is going to be what's going to make you happy. So sometimes you got to fight against that a little bit.
Most times.
Any other questions?
Ooh, we're popular. I like
Might have
this.
time for one more question.
One more? Okay, perfect.
Oh.
Any preference? I mean,
Oh, that's two. I think we do like two quick ones.
Flip a coin, flip a coin.
anybody want?
You're, I,
Yep.
Okay,
There
go
you go.
for it.
You have
Perfect.
priority.
Sorry, my darling. You can ask us after if you'd like.
It's a two-part question. The first part is,
Sneak it in. I like it.
sorry, what are we doing? I guess how well aligned are we from studio to studio in terms of inclusionary recruitment practices?
I have no idea.
And the second part of that question is, if we have ideas for, it's not. I'm not saying my ideas are going to be revolutionary, but who would we speak to?
Actually, I'm gonna start the second one. I don't know, but on this code, I'm gonna open a suggestion box. So we start from that. On the first one, I think it's really, really interesting and important to take into consideration that Sumo is a huge group, right? We have a lot of studios with a lot of different people there, and people in different kind of parts of that journey of self-discovery, of just understanding all of this that we talked. So while I think our processes are really, really good, and I think we are getting better, we have diversity inclusion constantly helping us, the TA team across the globe, in India, in Canada, and everywhere, HR constantly helping us. There is more than we can do, and I think the challenge is to make sure that each studio understand that this is not us taking out the individuality or the kind of creative ownership. This is about us, like this will pay off for you in the future. You might not believe in that or not, but as a group, that's kind of what we do. We need to kind of take the message and then brave the storm a little bit. But I would say we're not there yet. There are definitely some studios that be more diverse than others and just more open to be diverse. But I feel like if we look at the individual people in each studio, that's not the case. I think everyone wants to change and wants to improve in each studio, but we're never going to have 100% of those people being on that mission. So yeah, there's good people in every single Sumo studio. There's great people here as SDC. But, that is much more than we can do. And now we have tables, so we can just kind of like follow that.
Sarah loves her data, obviously. Yeah, I think my answer would be for you on your second question. Kind of spoke to it already, but, leverage your wheelhouse, leverage your area, and be as inclusive as you can within your own space. And others will kind of naturally, pick up on that and gravitate towards that. And maybe you'll find someone else who believes in that as well. And, get buy-in from individuals around you and bring it up with folks and say, hey, this is something I really care about. This is something I'm super interested in. And, I'm willing to put some extra time and effort from my own time to make improvements. Because a lot of the time it feels like you're passing that responsibility off to someone else. And so by saying, I'm going to help here and I have an idea and I'm willing to start that idea process myself, get buy-in from others, that's usually how leadership's like, all right, sounds good to me, So if you can kickstart it, that would be my suggestion. Yeah. Thank you.
I think they're going to kick us out now.
Yeah, I think we're done.
I'm happy and
Thank you so
thank you
much for coming, everyone.